Welcome to How Not to DM. I'm your host, Derek. Thanks for joining me on my quest to interview the very best dungeon masters on this plane of existence. With me today is my friend Riley. Riley and I both live in the great state of Utah, and Riley has a couple of awesome podcasts, Friend and Foe Adventure Co., an actual play show, and the Board Game Community podcast, which we will dive into later. Welcome to the show, Riley.
Hey, thanks for having me, Derek. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. So, you know the drill, Riley. You've heard the show a few times, I think. So, let's start from the top and tell us a little bit about your tabletop role-playing game backstory.
Okay. Hi, I'm Riley. I am the BM, aka Bunker Master for Friend and Foe Adventure Co., which is a actual play podcast that uses the Bunkers and Badasses, we'll call it B&B, system. And that's based on the Borderlands video game series. And my friend and I, big nerds, we used to do you know what Shenai are? They're like the bamboo practice.
Okay, yeah.
So we used to Shenai fight. And so we had been Shenai fighting.
Do you get welts and stuff? You actually hitting each other? Okay,
yes, absolutely. Wow. And it hurts. It hurts pretty bad.
Yeah.
So we usually go until one of us can't go anymore, right? Until somebody gets injured enough to be all right, we're done. We're done for the day.
Yeah.
So we did when I think I got hurt. And so I was like, all right, let's call it. I don't want to, I can't take the pain anymore.
Yeah.
And he was like, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons? So this was 2004 or 5. So it would have either been 3E or 3.5. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. Why not? He kind of described what it was. I don't think I had heard much about it. And so I made a rogue, and we made that character pretty quick. I was infiltrating a cult in a cave, and
classic.
I immediately am like, so I can just do whatever I want. You sure? And he's like, yeah, you just have to roll for it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take my daggers out, and I'm going to start scaling this wall and get on top of the ceiling and get above them so I can ambush them. And I rolled well enough that I could do that. And he was like, this is great. I was like, this is ridiculous, and then all right, I'm going to drop down on him. And that fails. I take a little bit of damage, whatever. And then the fight breaks out. And then I'm doing all these flips and tricks and stuff, making combat way harder, right? Because it's all right, well, in addition to just normally attacking, you're also doing these skill checks or whatever. But I had a lot of fun and never got invited to play again.
Oh, no.
And I totally would have, because I was loving it. After high school, I started listening to podcasts, and it was Harmontown was one of the first ones. And at the end of their episodes, they would Dan Harmon, who's the creator of Community and Rick and Morty, he would be blackout drunk, and they would play D&D.
Right.
It was great. So then eventually I made my brother run some campaign, or run a campaign for us, for me and my friends that listened to the show. And we had a lot of fun doing 2 or 3 sessions, but eventually that fell apart. And so then I just had to live vicariously through podcasts, because I didn't know anybody that DM'd other than my brother. And our schedules never really lined up, or I couldn't get a group to play with him. And I don't think I wanted to join his group for some reason. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I wasn't comfortable playing with those people.
Maybe.
But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into them. And then eventually back a couple of years ago, they announced Bunker or B&B, and I was like, I'm going to make an actual play of that. And so from there, I was like, that means I need to start DMing. So I borrowed my brother's books and started studying it, and getting ready, because I thought, I should get some experience before doing an actual play and see if this is something I would actually want to do.
That's fair. That's fair. I've had guests who their first game they run is recorded as an actual play, and then I've had people who wait a long time to dip their toes in, and everything in between. So I think, there's definitely no right answer, but it's definitely, whatever you feel the most comfortable with. And so, yeah, I can appreciate that, doing a little prep beforehand. So that was when you first started deciding to run games. Is this new system comes out based on Borderlands games, which you love, and you're like, I'm going to do this. So yeah, how did your first game go that you ran? Who was it? What game was it? And how did it go?
It was with my wife, Kimmy, my friend Matt, who is on the show as well. Kimmy is on the show. And then I had my brother who had, at that time, over a decade of GMing experience and playing. And I told him, it was the, what's it called? Dragon of Icespire Peak.
Oh, yeah.
That beginner one-shot. So I had studied up on it. I read through to a certain point and felt really comfortable with it. And I have a theory of if you want to be good at something, you really need to struggle with it. So I told my brother, use your decade of experience, put me through the ringer.
Make me sweat. Yeah.
Make me sweat. Yeah. Make this hard.
Yeah.
Pull out all the stops of things that annoy you, derail or whatever it is. And I'll try and get you back on track. And I didn't tell my wife or Matt this.
Right.
I should have probably.
Maybe.
But it was really fun. He made a character that had a really bad sense of direction, which I thought okay, yeah, he might get a little lost if you tell him east, west. They go to the inn and they're asking oh, are there jobs here? Whatever. Well, who do we need to talk about about the dragon? Whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's oh, there's a job board across the streets. Just go there and look. And there's a couple options, whatever. And so he goes out. He's the first one. He's leading the way. He goes out and he immediately turns left and just goes into the forest. And I was like, oh no.
Bypass all of the plot hooks, just straight in.
Yeah, I'm the direction you're heading is nothing. There is nothing on my book for this area. And the other two players are we're not following him. Yeah,
see ya.
See ya. So they go to the job board and stay on task. And so then I had a split party within 30 minutes of my first game. And it was really fun. I actually think it was nice because then I had him run into a garden and, I just made it up, right? A secret garden in there. And somebody got mad at him because he was foraging. Little did I know that he was foraging, he's experienced. He ended up foraging for potion of healing materials.
Of course.
Yeah. And so he was totally taking advantage of me there too. Of oh, okay, cool. One of the first missions you do is to get a potion of healing, right? And it's way too expensive otherwise. And no, he's just making one. So he did stuff like that. But it also gave me the opportunity to make up some random NPC that comes in and is yelling at him, hey, you're not supposed to be in my garden. What are you doing? Oh, you're an adventurer, aren't you? Let me walk you, but and walks him all the way back. And then the other two, this was their first time ever playing an RPG. Matt had listened to several shows like The Adventure Zone. Kimmy, nothing.
Yeah.
No experience at all. So that was really interesting. And they were great. The first session, they stayed on track pretty well. And then the second and third session, they were more so getting crazier and crazier. And I don't think a single session of that book ever went to plan. Right. And it was so glorious because that's just how I feel that's how every game is.
Yeah, there's definitely some groups who are we want to play Curse of Strahd, so we are going to do that. But then there's others who just want to make their own adventures and you just go with it. So, yeah. All right, so you mentioned your brother just totally going off the rails the first session, but it sounds like you handled it all right. So we won't chalk that up to failure. But I'd love to know what some examples are of how not to DM or GM or BM in your case, and any stories to tell, any wisdom to share about stuff you've run into and maybe how we could learn from it.
Definitely. I think. So on our show, every show, I think, jokes about the GM being God, right?
Right. And
so that's I've really played into that and get blasphemous or whatever. But but I started to take that very literally sometimes where I thought, here's my characters have broke into this mansion. One of the characters is in a library. He wants to look through the books. I had written lore. I had actually written out 10 books so he could roll a D10 and find X amount of books if he wanted, and they would tell him what books, and those might actually give him advantages or whatever. You get real elaborate here.
Is this the first boss? That mansion? Is that what you're talking about?
No, actually.
No? It's been a while since
this is the one with Ian, who's the designer.
Oh, yeah, okay, I've listened to this
first
too.
One, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And so he was just joking around. It was Kyle. And he said, like, oh, and I find a dirty magazine in between the pages. and I was like, no, you don't. No, this guy's classy and he keeps his library nice and like he's in history, you know, like in my head, I was just like, no, this is who my character is. Don't mess him up. And then afterwards, I thought that was the dumbest thing for me to do, because here he's adding to the world, right? Like his character is there in the library. He's looking at these books. Why not let him add to it? Add some flavor. And yeah, this time it might be like a dirty magazine is hidden in there. I could write that off as like one of the bodyguards put it in there if it was, you know, like
yeah, a lot of ways to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like instead of saying no, come up with a creative way that it fits into the narrative. That one bugs me still, and it's such a small thing, but I hate when I say no. And I don't want to, you know, unless it's something really big. And luckily, I think my players know their boundaries. They're not like, I want to jump to the moon, you know, like they keep it relatively realistic to where I can say yes. But yeah, that one sticks out. And then the other one, or did you have something?
No, okay. Keep going.
The other one is Session Zeros. So I had listened to your show. Board Game Community Show and How Not to DM started within a week of each other.
Yeah, kind of crazy.
Yeah. And so I had listened fairly early on. Oh, I should have looked at what episode I started on. I feel like it was within like the first 4 episodes. And so I was like, I would be out working and I would be listening and getting ideas. And so a lot of my show is done because of you, like the way it is.
Hopefully it's helped instead of hurt.
Oh, definitely. Which I'll get into later, because I think I don't think I've told this story because specifically I was like, I'm saving this story for when I come on to
real-time reaction. Okay. Yeah, I like it.
Maybe I hope I haven't told you. Anyway, no, maybe I have. Maybe we did at lunch.
I will just pretend like it's the first time. If
perfect.
So, no one will know.
Anyways, you had talked about Session Zeros. I heard other people talk about Session Zeros. I thought I knew what Session Zeros were. So I did one. We like talked about who our characters are. I told them certain words are like absolutely not allowed on the podcast and certain types of actions. But even then, we didn't come up with like a safe word, which I wish we did in a way. Because I don't like, there's a part where Phil calls one character the B word. And it's like episode 1, I think. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to have the character react and like scold him. Because I don't like that word.
Yeah.
Like I hate it. And so I was so like, oh, threw me off. And I tried to react in game, tried to discourage it, but it didn't really help. And it ended up becoming kind of like him being sexist was kind of part of his character at that point.
Right.
Kimmy and I talked about it later too. And I was like, I don't like it. And she's like, yeah, I don't like it either. So then I had to come up with some sort of way, because we're a podcast. It's not like we can just sort of write that off or like change it in a way. So I came up with a way to do it in canon of like, now he gets punished whenever he does that. But had we had a safe word, Kimmy was like, if we had a safe word in episode 1 or 3, I would have used it, you know, and so I regret that. And then later too, I all of a sudden second guessed it because Phil's gay. And I'm like, shoot, actually, that's like part of gay culture is calling people the B word, you know? And I'm like,
it's a tangled web, man.
It is.
It can be tough. It can be tough.
So he and I had conversations about it. And I asked him, like, I told him why. And then I told him, you know, like, oh, I'm not really comfortable with that. But like, are you okay with me giving you this curse so that anytime you do it, you have to take damage? Or I think I did it more vague than that.
Right.
And then it ended up becoming like a really great part of the podcast of him. Anytime he does something like slightly sexist, he takes damage. And yeah.
It's trying to force character growth that may or may not happen.
I know.
It's funny though. It is good. Yeah. It's tough. People run into these scenarios a lot where they're just not sure how to address something that's made them uncomfortable, or they can tell has made other people uncomfortable. You mentioned safe word. I know some people have like cards with an X on them where you can just like hold it up and stop play, or there's a bunch of different ways to go about it, but it definitely is important to make sure that everybody is comfortable with what's happening and feels safe and welcomed while they're playing a game. You know, like everyone deserves to feel comfortable and be having fun when they're playing a game together. For sure. So we've talked about some more unfortunate things that have happened in your games, but let's jump to the good stuff now. So tell me about some really fun parts, some really meaningful or emotional or, you know, humorous stuff, good stuff from either your show or from games you've run that, you know, haven't been recorded that are, you know, that people can learn from in a good way, you know, like, hey, I did well here, or I did well by not doing anything, you know, that kind of thing.
One of my favorite memories is that Kimmy couldn't make an episode. And so I was thinking, I still want to do a session, right? And I'm really excited. I don't have anything else this day. Nobody else has anything. We all booked it out. And so I was like, I'm doing it. Talked to Kimmy beforehand and told her my idea. And the idea was that we were going to do a flashback to some time. And I remember saying this to people who are a lot more experienced than me. And saying like, I ran a completely improvised episode. And they're like, well, yeah, every session is improvised, right? And it's like, well, yeah, in a way. But like this one, I literally did zero prep. I told them it was a flashback. One person I was like, suggested maybe we go a year back, but you don't have to. We can go further back. We can go more recent. Everybody ended up deciding on doing roughly a year before. And then it was really cool to not have anything prepped at all, and everybody was separate. And so I would ask them questions about, okay, well, where do you think you were a year ago? What did you just finish doing? Or what have you done recently? Is it before this reference that you've made or after, or is this going to be that reference, right? Things like that. And so ended up just completely winging it based on those questions. And that was so cool because they got to build some lore. They got to develop their characters better. And it was a cool exercise for me to be like asking those questions and having those one-on-one interactions with them and seeing what kind of cool story I could weave with that. And I ended up being able to, at a certain point, I realized, oh, I can connect these two stories in a way that they don't see. And when I got to drop that bomb of like, the beginning of your story is the end of this person's story type of thing.
Yeah.
Was just such a satisfying thing for me. But I think also all the players were really, really thrilled with that, that they got to like explore the past and develop the world, because they all got to pitch in things, right? Like, okay, you're not in this city. What city are you in? What's the population like? Oh, what kind of work is popular there? You know, like asking those kind of questions, being able to let them contribute to the world and say like, well, there's a old pawn shop and it's called Dave's Detritus, you know, like, cool. What's Dave like? You know, developing it like that. What kind of friendships do you have? All those types of things are really, really fun to do. I definitely think everybody should do a zero prep session where you just ask questions and build it out.
One of these days I will get up the courage, / will just have the necessity to do it. But yeah, I haven't done it yet. I've done sessions where I've done like very, very little prep, like, you know, 1 or 2 bullets, but it was still enough to like have an idea of what was going on. Yeah. One of these days I'll try it and I'll tell you how it goes.
Yeah, do, because at least from my experience, it's just really fun and it can be really rewarding.
Yeah.
And even if you make mistakes, then you can, you know, like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Hand wave it, retcon it, whatever you got to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the players will probably have fun doing it because they get to like, they're the ones. It's almost like you're like backseat DMing, because you're just like, well, what is going on here? Okay, well, I'll describe that then for you, you know,
right. You tell me what you want.
Yeah. Tell me what to describe for you or whatever. It's awesome.
Yeah. But I love it.
Yeah. Another thing this thing you actually retweeted and participated in was the Never Have I Ever. And I was so excited about that because they were on a train. I had plans for that train, at a certain point, the end of the episode, they get to do this. But for the first little while, they just get to do whatever they want. So, of course, they go to the bar, they start drinking, and they're like, well, let's play some drinking games. Okay, what game? What game can we play as on a podcast? And,
yeah, that would be interesting.
That would be interesting.
Instead of just like rolling dice to see if you win the card game or whatever.
Yeah.
Not as interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up coming up with Never Have I Ever. And that was so much fun to do because it was like, they're doing lore stuff, right? They're saying like, never have I ever burnt down a building. And then like, somebody drinks and it's
right.
like, what
building did you burn down?
Yeah. Never have I ever been in love. And it's like, what question is that? Okay, who's that gonna be? Or that was really cool to do, really fun. Definitely recommend those types of things. In hindsight, of course, like immediately after doing it, I thought of so many cooler ways to implement it. But being able to just say, yeah, that's what you guys want to do. Let's do that. Let's play a drinking game, right? Like, you don't need to roll dice, right? You just you're literally doing role playing. And if you drink, you drink. If you like, it's not like roll to decide if it's true or not.
Right.
But yeah, that was really rewarding to do.
I like it.
Yeah.
I'll have to remember that one for the future. I remember the retweet, but like I have never implemented it in my games. So
yeah,
I'll have to check that out too. So in the course of running games, you're always going to run into this, DMs and GMs and BMs out there. Riley, when was a time someone just totally threw a wrench in your plans and destroyed it and you had to like pick up the pieces and put it together real time, within the next 5 seconds to make everything work again?
Yeah, this is my favorite. I feel like my players do this to me on purpose.
Probably.
They do it all the time. At one time I set up an episode and or a session. I always call them episodes because that's what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they had, what was it? Oh, I had set it up so that they were going to search for this pet skag, which is like a dog. And then like they could use that to get into the facility or something, or like attract some bodyguards away.
Mm-hmm.
And
not to make it into a skag burrito.
No,
okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't want to eat those.
No. And they were just within, I think, 3 minutes of me putting that quest out, which was the very start of the session. They had moved on to being like, well, we don't need it. We could just lie and lure them to a warehouse and kidnap them and then get somebody even bigger there. And I was like, oh no. Okay, well, that was my entire session. And so then it turned into the whole, what do you do? Like, I'm asking them questions. How do you want to do this? And then I might have like an NPC pitch in an idea or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up being a pretty weird turn. And I really liked it. But yeah. And then one even more recently, the arc we're on right now. So no spoilers for anybody. But I had this idea that I was like, water is becoming scarce. And there's these 3 facilities that are making like melting ice to get water and distribute it. Mm-hmm. And they're all different quality, different prices. They're going to go tour the facility, negotiate something, whatever it is, and then come back and decide. And so they, like, 3 of the players went out and did that. Then they come back and they have a meeting, and I had set up the prices. This is like key story stuff that'll be like pay off later in my head. I'm like, okay, yeah, I got this like brilliant plan. And 2 of the players had decided on the one that I was hoping they'd pick. They were like, oh, I want this one. And then my wife pipes up and she's like, well, why don't we just take over one?
Seize the means of production.
Yeah. She's like, why do we even need them? And I was like,
thanks, Kimmy.
No, babe. I played it. I tried to play it cool. I think I did. And I told them, like, well, we do need people to run it, which we can hire. We need to outsource this. We need to do this, like come up with that logic. And luckily this was the end of the session. that this idea came up, but like I was doing that type of thing, and then they ended up rolling with that. And so like my next episode was just do a side quest, you know, like that was my plan, was here, now we have some free time, go have some fun, do like silly side quests. And now they're like going and working towards infiltrating the one of the plants and taking it over. And it's led to so much good stuff. And I'm so glad that my wife was the one to suggest it, because I was, and after the fact, she was like, I thought that was literally the only option. And I was like, I never thought of that for some reason. Like, I should have.
Right. Like, of course they're going to do this, right? Like, of course they're going to commandeer whatever they can commandeer.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I like that. All right. Do you have any homebrew rules or that kind of thing you like to throw into your games that go above and beyond the B&B rules or whatever system you're playing that you feel like make the game more fun, more interesting, engaging?
I think a lot of people talk about nat 1s being auto fail, and nat 20s being auto success. I really like that, so I do that in D&D as well. I know that some people don't like that because it's like, well, there's still the struggle, or
right,
like you could still, people justify it, and I totally makes sense in some cases. Like, I'm a rogue and I'm really good at breaking into things, but this chest I rolled a nat 1, and even though I have a +6 to lock picking, why am I failing it, or whatever?
Yeah, lockpick breaks, or it's a lock you've never dealt with before.
Yeah,
there's a dozen different ways you can play it.
Exactly.
Now, on the flip side, though, like people who worry about, well, you can't make nat 20s an auto success because what if it's like really, really hard? And it's like, okay, well then don't make them roll for it if it's going to be an impossible task. And then you don't have to like let the bard seduce the dragon and, you know, destroy the years long campaign you've been doing or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Like this.
Another thing is a lot of B&B. I love this about B&B is generation tables. Like, they have so much, because one of the things about Borderlands is the billions of guns and equipment and stuff, and
right? Because it's all procedurally generated by the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like in the video games, they have like different stocks and different clips and hammers and barrels or whatever for the guns, and so when it generates loot, it can like generate different manufacturers item parts on these, or gun parts in different places. It's crazy. It's really smart. So what they do here is like, you know, a roll table where you're rolling to decide the brand and what type of gun, and then the rarity, and then you might get like a prefix so that it could be like worse or better than something that rolls it the same. It could be legendary and you get like red text and it does some weird crazy thing, just like in the video games where it'll like shoot swords or something, you know. Like I really, really love that. But the game, it has some shields and some grenades, and I thought like, well, why not make my own table? So I homebrewed some tables for that, 2 classes for it, because my wife likes playing a siren, but she didn't really want to be one of the 2 siren options in there. So I was like, well, why don't we make you a pet? You know, like you could have a pet cat, is what I was saying at first, because she loves cats. And then she decided on a hummingbird, and I was like, even easier. Like, that's great, you know. And then that one was completely original, but the other one was I homebrewed a mech pilot, which is based on the Borderlands 3 character Mose, and that was really fun to do because I had a reference sheet. I could just pull up their skill tree and be like, how does this translate into TTRPG form? You know,
luckily someone's done some of the work for you.
Yeah. Exactly. And like, what skills would be fun in here, and how does this work? And then you also have to like fix it as you go, right? Like realizing something's super weak and there's no way that this thing will like work in the future once you get past a certain level or certain difficulty.
Welcome to Quickfire Chaos.
So this week on Quickfire Chaos, Riley and I are going to roll up some random encounters from the internet and we're going to create a scenario to role play together. And I'll let you decide on the flavor. If you want to make it Borderlands flavor, that's great. Okay, so the first table we're going to roll on is D100 fetch quests. So Riley, if you would, let's get that first D100 roll and see what I'm trying to fetch here.
44.
The remains of a hero lost in battle.
Okay.
So now we're going to build the NPC together. So we'll start with the job of the NPC.
34. More fours.
A dairy maid. You know what? We've had this one in the past. Dairy worker. We don't care about the gender of the dairy worker. You can decide. Traits of this NPC.
54.
I don't know what the odds are, but they're slim. 54. Indifferent.
Okay.
The trait of lacking enthusiasm for or interest in things generally, remaining calm and seemingly not to care, casual lack of concern, having or showing little or no interest in anything. Languid. Spiritless.
Oh boy.
Some good synonyms. All right. The last D100 roll for us will be how they sound. Their voice. If it's another 4, I will laugh.
54.
No way. I have witnessed it too. I have looked at every single roll. That is incredible. Repeats under their breath the last word they say.
Oh no.
Okay, Riley. I'm just a traveling drifter. I'm showing up in town looking for work. I got like a black hat on and a sweet mustache, and I'm just rolling into town looking for work.
You're heading to town when you see a fenced off area, and there are these little insects in there. Well, they're not little, they're pretty big.
How big we talking?
We're talking maybe the smaller ones come up to your hip, the bigger ones above your head.
So very big.
Very big. Yeah, very large insects. They've got 6 legs, giant wings, almost mosquito-like snozzes,
Are a few of them buzzing around, or are they all in the pen?
They're all in the pen. They're not flying. You see this chain linking to their wings. You get the feeling maybe it's enchanted. It keeps them grounded. Maybe it's just keeps them from flapping too hard together. But these must be some farm type Varkid. You've seen Varkid before in your travels. And there's a barn, open door. You can see some scurrying in there. Some of them climb up on walls and just are sitting on the side. But around the fences, there's little electrical posts that'll, arcane, infused with arcane energy and zap out as one of them gets too close or tries to climb over the fence. And, and you see a woman who is sitting on a bar stool, or who's sitting on a small stool under one of them, and she's got a milk pail, and you see her milking one.
What color is this milk?
It is a gross, like mucus yellow green. Yeah,
I knew you'd choose the color. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a great color.
Any particular odor hitting my nostrils?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, you smell. It's a very funky smell, very distinct to Varkid dairy farms, where you see the pens and there's not a bunch of feces in there. So they wash them off and put them into a lagoon, and that lagoon just sits there and kind of ferments with that. Eventually they wash it out into the fields and try and grow some crops with it. It's kind of like a fertilizer.
Trying to be sustainable.
Yeah, it's manure.
So. Living out west, you and I are both familiar with the smell of farms.
Oh yeah,
I got it.
yeah. If you go out on a dairy farm and you see her stand up when she sees you and waves you over towards the fence.
Okay.
But you kind of hesitate maybe because of the smell.
I wait for a second to look behind me to see if she's waving at someone behind me. Is that someone else she's talking to? Nope, it's me. All right. Just my jacket a little bit, my duster, and then mosey on over.
She rolls her eyes as you do that. Walks up to the fence line. You probably want to stop right there because you don't want to get zapped by the fence. But I do have some work. You look like an adventuring type.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just Making my way through town and looking for some work, make myself a little bit of money, you know, spend it as I need it. So, yeah, what you got for me?
Okay. I mean, I don't really care about all that. That sounds like a lot of unnecessary backstory that you're telling me.
Okay.
And I'm not here for that.
I appreciate you being a straight shooter, at least.
Feel kind of like you probably owe me a little bit of money.
I disagree with you there.
Okay.
All right, what's the job?
All right. I have to look at it because it's been a little while. Yeah. Of a hero. Well, around these parts, there used to be a milker named Maven, and she was the Milk Maven Haven Raven is what they called her. She would wear black. She was, like cool if you were into that kind of thing of like gothy, whatever.
I just happen to be into that thing.
Oh, I have to repeat words. I forgot that.
You're getting there.
Okay. You probably won't be into this person because she's dead. She's dead.
Well, that's unfortunate to hear, of course. But what does a dead person have to do with me?
My boss doesn't believe that she died because she's so legendary or whatever. I mean, people die, but she got taken away by some stray Varkid, some really just mean wild Varkid came up. I guess they didn't like her milking other beings of that same type, if you know what I mean. If you know what I mean.
I'm not going to ask you to elaborate. No.
Yeah, I don't care to elaborate. So they took her away and put her in this. They burrow in. You see these anthills. You probably saw anthills coming in. I don't know. Like maybe you could fetch the body or something so that my boss can accept and move on.
All right, so Maven was a milker.
Yeah.
Who done got snatched up by one of these critters, carried off to an anthill. You have any idea which direction they might have headed?
Well, they went into that hill here.
Right there.
Right there, yeah, just like 50 squares out. But, that's a huge network. It's like, if you think of an anthill, right? So
miles of tunnels.
Exactly. So where it goes to. Also, this thing was pretty big, but when they tuck their wings in, they get pretty small. They can slide through those. So I don't know exactly how you're going to do it. You're probably going to need to just flood the whole anthill, or you're going to be responsible for the deaths of like hundreds, thousands, probably a bunch of babies in there.
Okay. What? Let's stop right there. Yes, I understand the implications. Is there any kind of plus side to me doing this job? Basically, like, what am I getting out of this? Finding Maven for you.
Well, first you'd be paying me back for talking. That story you told at the beginning was real boring.
Certainly will not be paying you back. No.
Oh, okay. Being a little difficult, I guess. I suppose that I could give you a clipping of this wing here. Nope, that's garbage. I'm just trying to think of what doesn't matter here. Oh, but you probably want something valuable.
Yeah, that is the trade. The trade system is what makes this economy work, right? Like, you have to offer me something valuable in order for me to do something valuable for you. I know it might not compute so well, seeing as you got difficulty understanding what's valuable. You have any money?
No.
Do you have any stuff?
I could give you milk.
What's that good for?
Drinking?
Could I sell it? Okay.
She gives, sometimes I do facial expressions, right? Like,
right.
So she gives a very, her face scrunches. This is the first time you've really seen her, other than slightly annoyed, this is the first time you see her face make any other type of thing of like, I don't know if this is valuable. My boss is the only person that drinks this stuff.
Did Maven have anything on her that would be valuable?
A really, really cool looking like a raven jacket, coat. It was enchanted so that she could soar through the air like a like a raven. Yeah, you could probably like take that if that's valuable. That sounds kind of lame to me.
Well, tell you what, I'll go find Maven and I'll decide if the jacket's worth keeping or not. And if I decide to keep it, then you can just tell your boss it was destroyed when I bring back the body. Does that sound agreeable to you, miss?
I mean, I guess. It's fine.
Okay, yep. Well,
it's something. And she already has started walking away.
All right, take care of you too. Yep, whatever. See you later. And I'm gonna just walk off toward the anthill. But at least I've got this really cool jacket that I can get. I feel like it would really complete the black hat, black mustache look. So,
yeah, it fits you. It definitely sounds like it could fit your attire.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, that was weird. I have a hard time with indifferent type character. Like low energy is not me.
Yeah, like those aren't people you'd interact with a lot. Like, you know, if you talk to someone like that in real life, you're just like, all right, like I'm gonna give them their space. Like clearly they don't want to talk to me. I'm not gonna force this. I will move on.
Yeah. And I was trying to picture Aubrey Plaza. That was the only person I could picture that it's like.
That's a very good real life comparison. Yeah. God bless Aubrey. Okay.
Yeah.
We have done it. That is Quickfire Chaos. So we've talked a lot about it already, but I'd love to hear about the origin story of Friend Info Adventure Co. You told us like I'm gonna do this actual play, but like tell us how you actually got it off the ground. You know, like what research did you do about starting podcasts before you decided to start it, or you know, you already had your other show running. Like, how did you go from I'm gonna do an actual play to actually doing an actual play? I said actual a lot.
Well, actually, this is how I actually did it.
Thank you.
Yes, this was actually the reason that I even did the board game community show.
Oh yeah.
So I was watching E3, I think it was, or PAX West. I think it might have been PAX West. Doesn't matter. I was watching them announce bunkers and, you know, like Borderlands, B&B, exciting stuff. And I instantly, within seconds, I knew like I want to do an actual play. Well, this isn't going to come out for like at least a year, probably. I pre-ordered it within minutes, right? I was so ready, so excited. I'd been listening to, you know, like The Adventure Zone and Dungeons and Daddies, and I hadn't played much, but I always wanted to. And I thought, I want Matt to be in it. I want Kimmy to be in it. The other two people, I don't know yet. We'll figure that out. Just really excited about that. I went shopping for microphones, you know, like I was jumping the gun for sure, like day one, as soon as they announced it. And then I thought, well, I've probably got time to kill. It would be nice to learn to edit. I used to do a little bit of like music editing back in like high school. So well over like a decade before. I hadn't really played with it since. And so I thought, oh, that's like a starting place, right? Like, I have GarageBand. That'll work. The pandemic started shortly after that. And I was trying to think of a couple ideas like, well, maybe me and my wife can do a podcast. And then that kind of fell apart. She was a little too busy to like do that at the time because the pandemic, like, you know, messes up a lot of people's work schedules.
Yeah. And hers especially, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so then, I reached out to a friend and I was like, let's just do a board game podcast where we talk about like board game design. Cause I was into board game design. And even backing up before this, like 10 or 12 years ago, I had started making a Borderlands themed board game. Oh yeah. Cause I'm a really big board game fan. And so like I built classes on there and like had all these ideas, right? I wrote out this big story. And so I instantly knew like parts of story that I could bring from that idea over. Anyway, so then pandemic's been going for quite a few months. I'm feeling like, oh boy, I can't talk to people. I don't know, like I'm self-employed. I'm stuck at home. I can't really go out and visit people like right now. My wife is immunocompromised. I have like heart condition stuff that like would be bad if I got it, you know, all this stuff. So I was like, online interviews. Let me practice talking to people because the only person I talk to is my wife, like,
right. And she's sick of me interviewing her.
Yeah, exactly. Like she doesn't want to hear about board games at the time, or, like she was tired of hearing me talk for sure. And I thought like, it'd be nice to meet new people in space and grow. So I started, and just even to learn to edit. So like really that whole idea came from like, I need to practice talking to people again because I am definitely out of practice. And then I want to learn how to edit like conversations. And that was a fun process. Since starting Friend and Foe, I have told a lot of people like, if you need help, if you want to start an actual play, whether it's B&B or something else, let me know. I'll help you. I'm happy to help. I would love more like actual plays out there. And I've helped a couple people.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of them have gotten past the editing part. Editing is like,
it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And even an interview like this takes way less time than like 4 or 5 tracks of players and you, and some actual plays like to add in music and sound effects and like so much stuff. Yeah. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Editing is huge.
Exactly. So advice for anybody that wants to start one is just record something real quick with you and one other person, or even just by yourself, and start editing that and cutting out silences and uhs and ums and filler words.
I've heard people say like play a board game, like just play like Clue or Monopoly or whatever. Like all of you like play a card game or a board game together, record that, try to edit that and see if you can like even do it and if you like it.
Yeah.
And if you figure that out and you can all like sound good and stuff, then try the actual play. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a smart one. I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Shout out to Ben. Thanks for that tip.
Yeah. Anyway, side tangent there. But then eventually, I started doing the practice DM stuff with D&D, and then they emailed out the one shot, and I was like, oh boy, I don't even know who I want on the show.
Was it like the Ashcan, like basic rules? Here's some character sheets. Here's the one shot, like before they released the full game.
Yeah,
cool.
Because they hit delays right with COVID, so I think from announced to release it was like 2 years, or maybe even like 2.5, something like that. Like it was a long wait because delays, power outages, right? Like manufacturing problems, just craziness. Yeah, so they sent this out, and one of the first people I had interviewed was Phil, and we hit it off. Like we chatted a lot after the interview. We started we would message every day, like all the time. We were just BFFs instantly. And it's like rarely a day goes by where we aren't messaging each other about some like random stuff. Yeah. And then I invited somebody else from the board gaming space that I had like interacted with a little bit at some like prototype meetings and stuff, or prototype conventions. He brought his partner on at the time. And then I had Matt. And we ran it. Really fun. Made so many mistakes. It's like episode 8 or something of our podcast, so that like you're at least somewhat into it by the time you hear like the poor quality, like some bad editing, and me. I think it was like the 4th game I'd ever run. The Ashcan version of that was like missing some crucial rules.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like shield recharge, and
so you just fill it in yourself.
Yeah. But it was like a really good, because they just took pages from the book.
Oh, they didn't actually purposely write shortened rules. Okay, so
they gave you like the first one shot in the book.
Yeah,
which was fun.
You were literally missing like a bunch of stuff. All right.
Yeah. But yeah, like so then after that one shot, it's getting closer to start like coming out, and it came in December, and I was like, okay, after the holidays we're starting.
Yeah.
First week of January. Mark, who was in the one shot, he wasn't available anymore. The person who played Elena, she wasn't available anymore. So then I had like Matt and Phil, and I was still really wanting Kimmy to join, but she was on the fence literally till the day of that we recorded our first episode. She was like, I don't know. And I like made up her character sheet and like helped her sort of pick a skill and, like get things together.
Yeah.
And I had done this whole custom class and wasn't even sure if she was going to play it. And then Kyle, we went to high school together, and we hadn't talked for like a decade, but he listened to the board game community show, and he offered up some music for when I did the act, like the one shot, and I put it on the board game community show. And so then after the others dropped out, I was like, we need a fourth. I kind of want to reach out to Kyle. Like, Kyle was awesome in high school. Like, it would be fun to reconnect. And so I reached out, and he was like, I just started playing D&D. Like, he had like played 1 or 2 sessions of D&D with his family and was really excited to join. So it was great. Yeah, that's kind of the origin of it, maybe in a rambly way.
All the pieces came together.
Yeah.
So it's based on the Borderlands video game system. We mentioned this a few times.
Yeah.
You've mentioned Phil hadn't ever played it before. What are the rest of your players? Had they all played it? Were they familiar with the lore?
Yeah.
With the flavor?
Yeah. Kyle had played it a little bit. He hadn't played the third one, which is what I based his class on. So that was, eventually he played it, and he's like, oh, it's fun to play it now that I've been playing for like a year as this mech pilot, the gunner in number 3. Matt had played through a lot of it with me online. I don't know exactly how much he plays without me, but I definitely had made him play a lot of it. Kimmy played through all of them with me. That was
like co-op kind of thing.
Yeah, co-op.
Fun.
So she's somewhat familiar with it. Video game stories are so hard sometimes, especially, I didn't realize this, but when you grow up playing video games or those types of things, you get used to like sectioning things off of, okay, the main quest I'm not going to get to, but this is what the main quest is. And then there's all these side stories going on of doing side quests. So she had a hard time separating, like, what's even
like,
the
why
main
are we
quest?
doing that thing? Yeah.
So it was an interesting thing,
especially RPG games, right? Like where you can go anywhere and do anything and interact with anybody. Like, sometimes you can get lost. Like, I know the joke is like people never doing the main quest, right? Or like, anyway, it's a franchise though that a lot of people are very familiar with. So do you find a lot of your fans and listeners and stuff are Borderlands fans, or are a lot of them like they have no idea, but they just like love the story and love the characters and kind of find it that way?
The IP, I think, definitely has helped bring some listeners to episode 1 at least, right?
Yeah.
The people that usually get to episode 3 stick with it, which I'm very happy about, because episode 3 for me is when I feel like most people are like, I was dying laughing because of this one thing, and I feel like that's when we really get to like be our characters and be our world. One of my favorite things, no offense to people who know the game and listen, thank you, of course, that's very like flattering that anybody spends time listening to us. This one girl, she started listening, and she was listening on Good Pods, and she would like rate and comment on there
on every episode.
Yeah, on like episodes that she listened, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And so we get like this interaction going, and then she gets to episode 5 or 6, and she's like, oh, I didn't know this was based on a video game series at all. And I was like, what? Okay, all right. Like episode 5 or 6, and she's like, I thought this was a homebrewed world completely, and that you were just doing your own thing. And I was so impressed, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, it's less impressive than that, but like I did homebrew the setting and everything because I was worried about copyright stuff. I didn't want to use their characters necessarily, and then be like, you can't do that,
right?
But that is one of the most flattering things. And then she ended up being our very first like paid subscriber. So shout out to Kelsey, which is so crazy to me that anybody would like, subscribe,
right?
Monthly payments to us. And I'm just like, oh, that's wild.
Yeah, I really hope this is worth it for you.
Yeah. And she's like, I still have never played the game, but you're one of my favorite actual plays. So
nice.
Yeah, really, really cool. Really flattering. So the majority, I think, have heard of it, but every once in a while.
Yeah, like me, right? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we've talked about Ian a few times too. Ian is one of the designers on the actual tabletop role-playing game which you are playing, and you've had him on as a guest on your board game show and also as a guest on the actual play. So what's it been like to interact with the person who helped make this game that you are playing, and has it influenced the show at all, like before or after you working with him?
He's so awesome. This is so not when I interviewed him, he had already funded his game Wonderlands War on Kickstarter. And I was kind of like, oh, that sounds interesting. The art is good. And he co-designed it with several other people.
Right.
And I was like, that's cool. But I'm more excited to talk about Borderlands, like B&B in the interview. And so we talked about like Wonderlands War and then this stuff. And then after that, we ended up talking for like 4 or 5 more hours after the interview. And we were just like hanging out, and he's just so cool. And we just clicked. So
nice.
Instantly felt really comfortable with him. And he even after winning awards for Wonderlands War, it's like on a lot of people's favorite game of the year type of thing and top 5 lists. And it was tied for my number 1. I couldn't decide between 2 board games. That's not because I know him.
Right.
Like I played the game and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed that I wasn't more excited when he was on the show
about this game that is now one of my favorite games.
Yeah. Like, so he's responsible for 2 games that I absolutely love. B&B, Wonderlands War, and we interact pretty frequently. I asked him to come on the show and he was like, yeah, I'd love to. So he made up a character, which was nice. I didn't have to walk him through the character creation.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous because, this is the creator of the game.
Right.
I'm still fairly new. I probably run a dozen games at that point, like total, including D&D, right? And I thought, I'm going to make so many mistakes. I know I've made so many mistakes already. And like, he comes on and we're playing, and then we would ask him questions, and he would say things like, well, rules is written as this way, but it's your game.
Yeah.
Do it however you want to do. Like, and we've talked about this multiple times of, I wrote the rules, I wrote the framework, but do whatever, like he's really happy that there's a homebrew community that alters, and like there's a part of me that's like they completely tear apart your game and be like, well, this part doesn't work, so I'm gonna make it, it doesn't work for me,
right,
is what they mean, but I'm gonna make it work for me. I'm gonna make it more complicated or whatever. I think coming from the Borderlands video games, they wanted to make it really approachable for anyone,
right,
to come in, because
D&D there's plenty of people who played Borderlands but have not played D&D and who would have no concept. First time picking up a D20, like, what are we doing here?
Exactly. Oh, something to brag about. I messaged him today.
Oh yeah,
before I came, because he's been on the show twice, and I am the only person still to this day of the recording to BM for him.
You're the one person. That's kind of cool.
I'm the one person. Yeah,
that's a good claim to fame.
I know, it feels weird. It's like the lead designer of this game, I'm the only person that they've played as a player with.
It's like the internet's been on this kick recently where they're like, tell me what's a flex in like your world or your sphere that no one else will understand, but there's a big deal. Like there's yours, like 99.9% of the population has no idea what you're talking about. But for those people who do, they're like, oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And so nice. Like, he's fun too. He comes up with such clever things as a player where like, he grabs something and then he'll call back to it at the end of the episode, or like use it in some way you don't expect. And I'm sure that he does this thing and sets it up, not necessarily thinking about that, but just being like, maybe I can later. He does, and he does it so beautifully. He's such a good player. One of our Patreon things might be him BMing for us, and I'll play as a player.
So if you're into this game and you know who Ian is, or if you're not, but you still are interested, sounds like Patreon's coming down the pipe. Check it out.
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned you started the board game show to like get used to running a show. What's been kind of the most fun part about running the board game show though for you? And how's that kind of paid off?
I guess I didn't really talk about this. I did Nerding Out, which was a very short-lived podcast with my friend. We interviewed Rob Davio, who is like, I call him like the daddy legacy or whatever. Like if you've ever heard of a legacy game, he probably designed it. So legacy games are board games that are meant to be played in a series of games, and they affect the next game. Each game affects the next game. So like Pandemic Legacy was one of the first big ones. Risk Legacy, Betrayal Legacy. So it tells a story throughout, which is very like RPG, right? You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
and so he has done a lot of interviews, and when we finished, he was saying to us, that was really fun because I don't have go-to answers.
Oh, like you asked him stuff he wasn't used to answering.
Yeah.
I like that.
He's like, normally I just pull from this hat, I recycle it. I might change up the way I say it, but you know, I've got this bin of questions that I always get asked.
His talking points and his stories that he tells on every show.
Yeah, exactly. So we got some stories out. So once Nerding Out was dying down because my co-host had a baby, and I was like, I really want to do that. So my focus was doing casual conversations with people. And yeah, I have like certain questions I ask, but I don't always ask them because I let it veer off and ramble and get off topic, but then eventually bring it back to like certain points that I always want to hit on. But yeah, that's been really, really fun, getting to talk to people. And it's fun to talk to like content creators and people who just play board games or design board games, publish board games, whatever it is. Other podcasters is a lot of fun for me because they usually have like fun stories and similar experiences.
Yeah.
But it's just cool to get to meet so many people. I did over 100 episodes.
Is there one or two games you'd recommend to folks out there, board games, that they may not have heard of that you really love?
You know, this is TTRPG stuff. D&D has a whole series of board games, and my wife, not very familiar with D&D, she loves this game. Lots of people who don't play D&D love it. People who do love it. Waterdeep, right? That's a major city. Lords of Waterdeep is
heard of it.
A worker placement board game that's really fun and fairly it's a little bit more on the light side of like what to learn. And it actually, I use it a lot of times to teach worker placement, which is where you have like, you might have 3 workers and then there's spaces on the board and you're going to put those workers there and do that action.
And then they generate so much resource kind of thing.
Yeah, those types of things, or actions or different things, right? You can draw a card or gain a resource. And the resources in that, they're just like orange, white, purple, black cubes, but they're supposed to be, you know, rogue, warriors, wizard, and cleric. Yeah, that's it. Cool. It's really, really fun. It's not that expensive, and it's definitely on the easier side to learn. Any board game can be intimidating to learn because you've got a rule book. But that one I think is well worth it. I know both people who are new to board games and very experienced love it. Another one might be like Quacks of Quedlinburg, which leans more into luck, where you're bag building. You've got a pot for making potions. I don't know if you're witches, you're herbalists or something. I don't know.
Is Quacks implying that you don't know what you're doing? Like
it's like doctor,
right?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, okay, quack. This quack is.
Yeah.
All right. And so you like build your bag with different ingredients, and the ingredients do different things, and you want to build up those and score points. It's kind of that was not a great description, but it's pretty heavy on the luck aspect of it. And most people that I played it with, I think everybody I've played it with has loved it. Like a lot of them end up buying it.
So we're winding down to the end here, Riley. I'd love to know what advice you have for folks out there thinking about running a show or starting a show. We've talked a little bit about that, but I'm sure you've got some more wisdom there. And then also people who are out there thinking about running games or who have started running games and have hit a block or just need a little bit of encouragement.
Listen to shows like this is my number one thing. We talked about, some writers don't read books of their genre because they don't want it to influence. Some musicians don't listen to certain music or whatever it is. Like in here, listen to other stuff as much as you can. Listen to shows like this because you're going to learn from other people's experiences, and you're going to be cocky. Like I have been several times where I'm like, yeah, I understand where they're coming from. That makes sense. But I think I can pull it off. You probably can't, but you'll be prepared to. I think I was more prepared when it failed, when those ideas failed.
Yeah.
Because of listening to your show and listening to other actual plays. I strongly encourage listening to a bunch of other actual plays, indie TTRPG, like indie shows, explore other systems. You can hear how other systems do it, hear what you want to implement into it. And I think that has been even more useful for me because like listening to, Brendan Lee Mulligan or listening to Travis or any of the McElroys, GM a game, I'm probably not going to run. I'm not going to run it like that. I'm not going to run it as well as them. There's no way, like at this point in my life, I've got to dedicate so many years to the craft. Yeah, listening to them, you can definitely find good things and steal good things from them. But I think you're going to relate more to indie ones.
For sure.
And you'll be able to be like, oh, yeah, I would run it like that. Or, ooh, I would have run it like this.
And honestly, indie shows are more fun because you can actually interact with them. Like,
yes,
Matt Mercer's not going to answer your DM. I'm so sorry. You probably can't even DM him because I'm sure he's got all of his accounts locked down because otherwise he'd be spammed 24/7. But guess what? Riley's going to answer you. I'm going to answer you. Like these indie shows out there, we love chatting with people about whatever it was that came up on our show or, episodes or rules or, anything. And yeah, that's the kind of interaction that you can't buy. It's
true. Yeah. And
something special about it. You've talked about how the board game community show is on a break currently, and you are working your way through the Friend and Foe Adventure Co. Main quest right now. What is the future of these two shows? And also, do you have anything else that you want to plug or like any other projects in the future? I know you mentioned you're in that Teens in Space game.
Yeah. Lots of things I feel like right now, which is very awesome. So board game community show on a break. I'm not exactly sure when it'll come back, but Kimmy and I have like laid out some groundwork. We've got a couple of really cool guests kind of lined up, not dates or anything, but just like hey, I'd love to be on the show, like
soft yes. Yeah. Nothing written in stone yet.
Exactly. Friend and Foe Adventure Co. I'm just absolutely in love with. Like the first stuff, I love it. It's fun. We get silly. We're learning to play. We're learning to like work together. But once the main story stuff goes off, like from episode 15 on, which seems like a lot to commit to be like, in episode 15, it gets really good. But most people like episode 3, I feel like people really get into it. I occasionally stream board games with people online. That's really fun. So you can like find me on Mr. Rao's gaming channel playing a couple games. I just last month played Spirit Island, which is one of my favorite it's my favorite board game. It's so good because I'm part Native American and it like reverses colonialism. So you're trying to drive out the colonialists.
Yeah. Okay.
The colonizers.
It's not you're going to colonize Europe. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you're an island and you're the spirit and you want to protect your indigenous people. I'll be on a future episode at some point of What the Dice. We're setting up our characters right now. So that's really exciting. I've been really loving their show. And then Big Campaign Stories, which is incredible. So I'm really excited to play with him because the way he crafts his world, his world is the most alive world I've ever like experienced. If you just want to hear about B&B, like the actual mechanics of the game, I was on the TTRPG Goblin.
Oh yeah.
And she interviews people, but mainly focusing on different systems other than D&D.
All right, that's exciting. That's exciting stuff. Thanks so much for coming on, Riley. It's been a blast. It was great to meet you earlier this year at SolidCon and get to know you better, get to know Kimmy. She's awesome. And yeah, thanks for coming on the show and for chatting about Friend and Foe Adventure Co., for giving the people some wisdom, and for just being an all-around great guy.
Hey, thanks. You too.